Mescaline is not just another psychedelic. Its use has been traced back nearly 6,000 years. It's arguably the oldest one known to humanity. Long before LSD or magic mushrooms entered the scene, prehistoric people were already harnessing mescaline's mind-altering power. To understand how mescaline feels, we will look at it through the eyes of some famous people. First, Aldous Huxley, an English writer and philosopher famously known for his work, The Brave New World, swallowed mescaline and said, "This is how one ought to see how things really are." As he gazed at ordinary objects, flowers, furnitures, they glowed with significance. Huxley felt he was perceiving what he called mind at large, a broader reality usually obscured by our mind's day-to-day chatter. His little book, The Doors of Perception, passionately praised mescaline's visionary qualities and opened Western eyes to the idea that psychedelics could be tools for philosophical and spiritual insight, not just madness. A few years after Huxley's experiment, a chemist called Sasha Shulgin, who worked for the DEA, tried mescaline and described his experience as a day that will remain blazingly vivid in my memory, and one which unquestionably confirmed the entire direction of my life. Under its influence, he found he could perceive hundreds of nuances of color never seen before. The psyche contains an entire universe of memories and perceptions, and there are chemicals that can catalyze its availability. In other words, mescaline unlocked inner worlds, convincing Shulgin that these substances were keys to human consciousness itself. And lastly, Michael Pollan, author of This Is Your Mind on Plants, decided to sample mescaline and said, "To say mescaline immersed me in the present moment doesn't quite do it. No, I was a helpless captive of the present moment, my mind having completely lost its ability to go where it normally goes, an unquenchable thirst for reality." Poland drank in these details with delight, observing that our normal consciousness rarely lets us appreciate pure being over doing. So, what exactly is mescaline and where does it come from? Mescaline is a naturally occurring psychedelic alkaloid found in a few species of cactus, primarily peyote, a small round cactus native to the Chihuahuan Desert in Texas and Mexico. Peyote has been a sacred medicine for indigenous people of North America for millennia. And second, San Pedro, a cactus from the Andes Mountains in Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, has an equally long history of use. In fact, an ancient temple in Peru, which goes back to about 1000 BCE, even has a carving of a shaman figure holding a San Pedro cactus. Chemically, both cacti contain mescaline as the active ingredient. Poland was interested in mescaline for research, but he found out as a non-Native American, peyote is legally and spiritually off limits to most outsiders, especially white people. Peyote is federally protected for Native American church use only. So instead, he turned to San Pedro, which is perfectly legal to grow and surprisingly common in places like California. But of course, trying to extract mescaline from it is illegal. But while Poland made a couple of unsuccessful attempts to be able to participate in a cactus ceremony, he discovered that he already had a San Pedro cactus growing in his own backyard. A friend had given him a cutting years before caught with its indigenous name Wachuma, so he didn't realize it was the famous psychedelic cactus. When it comes to these things, unsurprisingly, there is always an element of sign of universe, or simply that we live in a simulation, or more simply, that we create our own reality. Now, the story of mescaline is incomplete without discussing its rich history and cultural context. This humble cactus-derived chemical has been at the center of spiritual rituals, colonial clashes, and legal battles for centuries. Mescaline's history begins with the indigenous people of the Americas. Archaeological evidence shows that peyote was used as far back as 3700 BCE in the region that is now called Texas. That makes it one of the oldest known psychoactive plants used by humans. In what is today Mexico and the US Southwest, people such as the Huchiol, Tarahumara, Comanche, Kiowa, and many other tribes have revered the peyote cactus as a sacred gift. For these cultures, ingesting peyote was a gateway to the spirit world. They used mescaline visions for guidance and healing. For instance, shaman in some tribes would take peyote to locate lost objects or missing people, diagnose the cause of an illness or bewitching, and even to predict weather or the outcome of battles. In a more communal setting, entire villages would gather for a night-long peyote ceremony, singing, drumming, and dancing around a fire until dawn while under peyote's effects. The arrival of the Europeans in the Americas brought heavy persecution to these indigenous spiritual practices. The communal rituals like ghost hunts were brutally suppressed. Spanish conquerors saw peyote use as an enemy, which is so unsurprising to me, given that anything that promotes independent thinking is seen as a threat by the group that is trying to gain control over some other people. Consequently, peyote meetings were driven indoors. One pivotal figure in mescaline's history is James Mooney, an ethnologist. In 1980s, Mooney became one of the first white observers to participate in a Native American peyote ceremony. He earned the trust of one of the indigenous tribe by learning their language, Kiowa. Mooney witnessed the profound role peyote played in their culture and saw that it was a positive, life-affirming practice and not the depraved narcotic habit that some officials imagined. He advised the tribes that one way to protect their sacrament was to form an official church. By creating a formally incorporated religion, they could claim First Amendment protection for their ceremonies. This led to the founding of the Native American Church, NAC, in 1918 in Oklahoma. The NAC blended Christian and traditional beliefs, often referring to peyote as the peyote road or the sacrament, and to the Great Spirit and Jesus interchangeably. It spread rapidly among many tribes. The NAC's core practice is the overnight peyote ceremony, which carries prayers for healing, songs accompanied by drums, and consumption of peyote in a structured manner. By formalizing peyotism as the NAC, indigenous practitioners gained a stronger footing to resist outright bans. Despite these protections, a crisis came in 1990. In an infamous case, the US Supreme Court ruled that two Native American church members in Oregon could be denied unemployment benefits for using peyote, effectively saying that states could outlaw peyote even in religious ceremonies. This shocking decision meant the NAC's use of peyote was no longer automatically protected by the First Amendment. It sent shockwaves to Native communities and religious freedom advocates. In response, a broad coalition formed. Everyone from Native American leaders to civil liberties groups and even other religious organizations rallied to defend the right to use peyote. The US Congress moved quickly to remedy the situation. The result was the American Indian Religious Freedom Act amendments of 1994. President Bill Clinton signed this amendment into law, explicitly legalizing and protecting the religious use of peyote by indigenous practitioners. Mescaline's story forces us to confront difficult questions about freedom, spirituality, and cultural context. Who decide what substances we are allowed to experience and why? Why is one plant revered in one culture yet demonized by another? And what does our society gain or lose by labeling something sacred as illegal? It invites us all to reflect: what realities are we missing because we simply haven't learned how to use them? Mescaline, a doorway into a different way of seeing reality, an ancient guide to spiritual insight, and a cultural cornerstone deeply rooted in human history. It continually reminds us of our capacity to experience the world more deeply. Ultimately, Mescaline asks us to rethink our relationship with consciousness itself. Could there be truths about our own minds that we have been conditioned to overlook? Is it possible that the answers to our deepest questions aren't found externally, but rather through journeys inward? And in a world that is becoming increasingly AI, might reconnecting with these ancient practices offer something profound that our modern lives are desperately missing? Thanks for watching.